This lesson is on absolute value. The definition of absolute value is basically the distance between that number and zero on a number line. And so we all know that distance has to be positive. So every time you have an absolute value, you're going to evaluate whatever's inside those absolute value brackets. If that answer turns out to be negative, you're going to make it positive because that distance from zero on a number line would be positive. So let me give you an example here. If I have a number line with 0 here in the middle, if I have a number -3, I have to go 3 units to get to 0. So the absolute value of -3 is +3. If I have a value of 3, I still have to go 3 units, I just have to go in the opposite direction to get to 0. So the absolute value of +3 is also +3. So absolute value basically turns everything into the positive because you're dealing with distance from 0. Also, we have opposites. So opposites is a little bit different than absolute value. Opposite is when we would have a negative, say, on the outside of an absolute value. And if it's the opposite, it's saying, go ahead and evaluate the absolute value of 3. And the absolute value of 3 we just talked about is 3. Now I want the opposite of that. And so instead of +3, I'm going to write -3 because this negative waits until the very end and then it changes the sign. So that's the difference between an opposite and an absolute value. Here are a couple I'm going to try with you, and then on the next screen you're going to try a few on your own. So here I've got the absolute value of -3. Again, because it's inside the absolute value bracket, it's going to turn that into a +3, so that's my answer. Here I've got an opposite and an absolute value. So first I'm going to look at the absolute value of -2.3, and that is +2.3. And I still have this negative on the outside that tells me do the opposite of whatever your answer was, and so my final answer is -2.3. One thing I want to point out to you here is you may not do the ching-ching or keep flip change or any of that that you might do if I had something like -2.3 in a regular parenthesis. I could go ahead and do that keep flip change or ching-ching to make that into plus a +2.3. This absolute value is different. So it's inside that black box in the airplane where you can't get in. So get everything done inside first before you worry about anything on the outside of that. My last one here, I've got the absolute value of 4/5, and the absolute value of 4/5 is 4/5, and then this negative on the outside tells me to do the opposite, so my answer is -4/5. Try these 3 on your own. The first one, I've got -8. So again, I can't keep flip change. I'm going to go ahead and evaluate the absolute value of -8, which is +8. And then this negative on the outside says, then do the opposite of that. So my answer here is -8. For my second one, 4.7, the absolute value of 4.7 is 4.7. And I don't have anything to contend with on the outside, so that's my final answer. And on my last one, I have the absolute value of -1/2. Because it's negative, the absolute value makes it a positive. Nothing on the outside, so my final answer is just 1/2.